All right, folks. I do think that this is really more of an intermediate class, despite the fact that the name Fundamentals appears in the title. But, from a developing applications in ServiceNow standpoint, it's most certainly a fundamentals course. And for that reason, we're going to start at the very beginning, and we've got a variety of objectives to this end. My friends, never in my professional career would I deign to just read you bullet points like you see for the objectives on the slides. But if you take a gander at those, and I bet you already have, we're simply just trying to start from a solid foundation, discussing some basic concepts, addressing some of the jargon and terms of art, and figuring out what we need to get started on this journey. There's not a whole lot of demo involved with this topic, and there isn't a lab exercise either. Okay, enough prolegomena, let's get to it. Let's get started with some simple application development concepts. And in our very first slide, we see what looks like a bingo card. What on earth is going on here? Well, let's start with the green bits at the top. We know that ServiceNow, being an application platform as a service, right, a business automation platform that sits atop a relational database, we know that it comprises myriad applications. And these ServiceNow applications are the suites of features that really get things done. Now, you might be thinking, well, duh, I use ServiceNow all the time. Phil, I know that there's applications involved here. But what I want to point out is that there's more than meets the eye going on in the platform than you might see in the All menu or in the application navigator. Particularly, let's point out that if we go to modules like plugins or My Company applications, and by the way, the plugins modules got a nice fresh coat of paint for the Vancouver release, we'll see that the platform has a variety of interesting applications that lie dormant in the platform. They're just latent, like the proverbial frog in the forest waiting for someone to come along and kiss, well, okay, not kiss it, but activate it, right? And wake up these available features, which just simply may not be active in your company instance. So something that you should do is get in the habit of looking through the plugins module, looking through the product documentation, and to bring me to my next point, looking through the ServiceNow store for partner applications or indeed other ServiceNow applications created by ServiceNow. Generally speaking, our plugins module integrates with and pulls from the ServiceNow store, but I still really recommend that you take a look through store.servicenow.com. And applications that are out there on the ServiceNow store have been vetted. There's quality control, and the people that make them, if it's not ServiceNow ourselves, are in a vendor agreement with ServiceNow. They promise to provide support and so on in return for hawking their wares on the ServiceNow store. And don't think that all of those are expensive. Many of them are free. But so far, what I want you to realize is that before you go into the process of building an application from the ground up, it may simply be more cost effective to just purchase an application that does what you need instead of tailoring one specifically for your peculiar requirements. Now, later on, I really would like to show you another place that I like to look for cool ServiceNow goodies. But if you want to see that, you're going to have to look at the demo video. So where does that leave us? Well, I bet you can guess where this is going. Yeah, in the event that there's nothing out there that suits our needs, we can get down to business developing our own custom applications that do exactly what we want, which is what we're here to talk about today. And so remember that ServiceNow being a platform that's service-oriented, any of the available features or services in the product are available to your application. You don't have to figure out how to build those services. You just leverage them and stick them in your app. Of course, there's some work to be done there, but your application can quite easily have inbound and outbound email, web service integrations, mobile support, entry of data and management of data through forms and lists, and of course, ServiceNow's stellar process automation, and of course, unless you're an on-premises customer, ServiceNow hosts everything. We take care of all that stuff, so you don't have to, and we're pretty proud of our high availability, our upgradability, among other things here. And so these are all things that your application will get to benefit from, and of course, any of the applications you may have installed or purchased from the store or the plugins module, same deal. So we're off to a good start here. We've got lots of options. Folks, I doubt I need to tell you what exactly a cloud-based application is. The idea here is that if you've ever opened up a web browser, provided a username and password to use something that you got to access, whatever it's offering to you, and you didn't have to install it locally on your device, well, then you've used a cloud-based application. The entire ServiceNow platform is cloud-based, and therefore applications that you build within it are cloud-based applications. You pop open your browser of choice, authenticates the platform, and then through the miracle of cats and tubes that we call the internet, nobody knows how it works, but it works. The data and services you request are sent to you and consumed locally on your machine. So when you're building your application, you don't have to figure out how to deal with installers or anything like that. It just works when people log into ServiceNow, something they're already doing. So why might you do this? What could motivate you to develop a custom application? Well, if you look at that lower left quadrant there, to extend the value of ServiceNow, I mean, that's the gist of it, right? And this often just boils down to, hey, you know, there's some process in our organization. We want to model it exactly. We want to leave behind some incumbent, dusty old application that we might be using already and consolidate into the platform. Take a look at the lower right quadrant of the slide. I would never make it as a sales or marketing guy. It's just not my thing. So I say this with full genuineness if that's a word, that one of the best things you get out of this is consolidating processes and data into the same place, into ServiceNow, because then the data that you're storing can be used for logical decision-making in other processes if needed. Because let's face it, your enterprise doesn't operate in as siloed a way as you might be thinking it does. And when you start to model that process, whatever it might be in ServiceNow, if you think of it as a modular component, then it can be a part of a larger solution. I think that when you invest the data, invest the processes into ServiceNow, if you'll excuse the cliche, it returns dividends, and you get sort of something that's more than the sum of its parts. So how do you know what you should be building in ServiceNow? Well, I don't want to be a pessimist. I'm not as cynical as I look. There's a reason they ain't having me turn my camera on for this, you know what I'm saying? So that's it. I'm not trying to be negative, but let's start with the stuff that's not a great fit for ServiceNow. First of all, if your data is unstructured, in other words, if the idea is to have a whole bunch of complicated media so that you might endeavor to create within your organization the next TikTok, I think it is, the next Snappy Chat, or YouTube, I don't think it's going to work so well for you. That's just not what ServiceNow is meant to do. It's not in our wheelhouse. What is a wheelhouse anyway? But, don't panic. Yes, of course, there are data types in the database for things like audio, video, images. That's right, there are actual table column data types specifically for those things. And of course, you can attach those sorts of files to records as attachments as well. But my point is, ServiceNow is best suited for processes that we might associate with a relational database. We'll talk more about what that means. And not so much about streaming and social media. You ain't going to be building the next Netflix in ServiceNow, I don't think. Now, I'm sure you've already read the rest of the text on here, but look, if you are trying to shoehorn in some hip new code library that you think your solution absolutely hinges on, well, you might want to cool your jets there, especially if there isn't a standardized application programming interface for that code library of yours, and especially if it's not based around JavaScript. Now, the next one there about games, that breaks my heart. I used to work in the video game industry. I get it. But ServiceNow is not meant to be a game development platform. You're not going to create the next whiz-bang first-person shooter that's going to make you lots of money on the ServiceNow store. Just not going to happen. But just to plant the seed for you more creative types out there, I want you to consider a few things. Remember that ServiceNow offers a service portal solution, and the service portal type stuff gives you full front-end control of the document object model. We're not talking about service portals in this class. That's a whole other suite of classes you can go take elsewhere. But if you're designing service portal components, you get to use cool stuff like AngularJS and Bootstrap, and you can really mess with the document object model, and you might be able to get something going there. And ServiceNow's built-in flow designer and workflow processing engines, I think would be perfect for like a branching narrative storyline. My personal challenge to you is a year from now, I want someone to email me and be like, hey, you know what? I built some onboarding that worked like a visual novel game and it was driven by the flow designer, but I'm going off script again. So let's just move to that last statement. It's a bad fit in ServiceNow if there's no process flow through the application. And that's the most important one. If you haven't got a business process modeled, don't bother. Just don't do it. So let's talk about the good stuff. ServiceNow is, at its heart, a relational database, something called a MariaDB. I'll tell you about that in my demo video if you watch it. So of course, if it's a solution that you traditional database folks would love to model in a relational database, yeah, okay, ServiceNow's got you covered. Remember though that what makes ServiceNow so nice is its GUI, where we can enter records by using forms, among other things, with lots and lots of nice built-in reporting and performance analytics, our wonderful flow design capabilities, and the idea that your application can grow and be extended over time. But I think the next slide really gets to the heart of this. I'll let you draw your own conclusions about some of the claims on this slide. But it's this here, applications with a request-fulfill pattern. This is where it's at. And you'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, how many things in the enterprise can be conceived of in this way. You ever stop and think about how much of the work you're doing involves you as a cog in a process somewhere, where look, somebody wants something, and it's someone else's job to make sure that they get that something. That actually describes a lot that goes on at work, I would bet. We want a way to pull people out of these manual processes as much as possible and let a nice system of engagement and system of record like ServiceNow empower folks to serve themselves. And I mean that in the least toxically egocentric way possible. I just mean that ServiceNow really shines in modeling the automation, for granting things to people, for fulfilling the requests of people both inside and outside your organization. And if you take a look at the demo video, you'll see that that's precisely what we're going to wind up doing. Now, not to be too transparent with you, but this slide has been in this course material for a long time, and I don't have the inside skinny on where some of these application examples come from. I mean, pig lifecycle management. I don't know if that means that somewhere out in Iowa there's a farm, and Hank the pork farmer gets up at the crack of dawn and grabs his smartphone and gets a notification saying that it's time for one of the pigs to retire, so to speak. I don't know. But if you take a look around these examples, notice that there's some common threads of things like logistics. Things like the management and procurement and delivery of resources, even if that resource is simply data that needs to be crunched in interesting ways, like the lab mouse report example that we see down here. So I put this to you. Surely there must be something that you have a sticky note on your desk about to remind yourself to do every week, or there's some process that whenever it happens, even if it's not a regular thing, you know that you're going to have to buzz by someone's cube or pick up the phone and log into 3 different systems. And if you're like me, and I know I'm telling you something I usually only tell my therapist, you might even be put off from doing the thing at all if it's too much of a hassle and involves interfacing with too many people. Ugh. So think of those things. What is there something you wish you could automate in your personal life? No sharing on that end, please. This is self-reflection time. Or in your professional life at work. Can you conceive of it as having a mappable process flow, something that you could sketch up on a whiteboard? And can you conceive of it from a request-fulfill paradigm? You know, if so, I bet you after this class, you might be able to get something working inside ServiceNow. But in order to take advantage of all that, we need to learn the scoped application model. That's what I'm going to talk about in the next video.